Welcome everybody to this meeting of Transport for the North Scrutiny Committee. Today we are actually quorate, so we can now go ahead as planned. I'd like to remind you that this event is being filmed but is not going out live, but will go out live later, so your mannerisms and behaviours will be picked up, so just to be careful. One of the things I'd like to just mention before we really start into the body of the meeting is, as a result of sort of combined authority changes and changes of the membership of Transport for the North, we have now lost our colleagues from Lincolnshire, although they will still be participating on the main board as co-opted members. So I just wanted to thank them for all the hard work that they've done over the years and the support they've given me for the last 6 years. So I would truly like to thank them. And as I say, this board and the TFN continues to evolve as we get more and more combined authorities. So there will be more changes, no doubt. So thank you very much. Today we've got a packed agenda, but it's all on the same theme. And it's all about driving Transport for the North, participation in supporting all the different local authorities. The meeting will probably last about 90 minutes, but it will not go on beyond 1 o'clock for anybody who's got a fixed public transport appointment. So with that, then I'd like to just move into the meeting. And I'd like to ask, are there any declarations of interest before we start, please? No? Okay. So next is the minutes of the previous meeting. Could I have someone to propose the minutes of the previous meeting? Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. All in favour? Thank you. So now we move to the first substantive item, which is the budget and business plan for TFN. So there's a few things that are really important about this particular plan. Is as Transport for the North evolves, then this is about the evolution of the support that Transport for the North will give in future to all the constituent parties, whether they're combined authority or whether they're actually separate councils. So I'm going to hand over to Katie Day to lead us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the paper and the document as read, but perhaps just highlight some of the elements within it, because we really welcome your feedback and input today to shape the paper and the business plan as we then take it forward to the board on the 17th of March. So I think the first thing to say is, obviously we came to you in December with what we thought the outline priorities were going to be for our business plan for the year ahead. With your feedback and that, then we had at the board in the middle of December, we've built the draft business plan, which is presented to you this morning. What I can say is just literally in the last 48 hours, we've been pleased to receive confirmation of our core funding from the Department for Transport, and that is in line with what we expected, which was a standstill settlement. And we've got work in progress to finalise as well the elements that we get regarding our TAME services, our advanced analytical support that we also give to the department. So I hope we'll be in a position to confirm that up shortly. So our assumption has been around a standstill, and it has also been around our role, as a chair has said, supporting and enabling our constituent authorities with their work, as well as obviously leading with the strategic transport plan. So within the document, you'll see in there the 3 roles that we've set out as being the focus for us for the year ahead. Those are set out under paragraph 3.2. So it is that strategic evidence and advice that we're able to provide as a statutory body. It is acting as a broker and convener to accelerate delivery across the pan-regional. It's those pan-regional journeys. It's how you get from Newcastle to Northallerton, across to York and Leeds and over to the northwest as well. And importantly as well, the one that this committee have had a lot of attention on and we'll be hearing a little bit more about later is our TFN offer. So this is about how our data, evidence and our capacity and capability can provide support and enabling services to LTAs and MCAs as well, and of course combined county authorities as well. Just to give a little bit of detail on some of the priorities, therefore, under those three headings that we're going to focus on this year, I think it's beyond a shadow of a doubt that we will keep pressing for those pan-regional investments. So we've picked up in there, for example, the Trans-Pennine route upgrade, the A66, and of course the work that we've been doing directly to the department on a new station at Bradford, just by way of example. When it comes to evidence, we are going to finish our update to the decarbonisation strategy, and that will also reflect our work that we've been doing about the resilience and reliability of our transport networks in the face of a changing climate. And it will also reflect the work that we've done most recently on a carbon assessment playbook, which is a tool that can be used by authorities to help your local transport planning and thinking about your carbon reduction plans where appropriate. We further intend to continue our work around the Northern Appraisal Playbook. Again, an item we'll bring to your attention a little bit later in the agenda. But that has been really timely because what we've done as the North over the last few months is been able to set out where there might be flexibilities that can be used already to better make the case for transport investment in the North, but also what reform is needed to strengthen those cases even further. And with the Chancellor announcing a review of the Green Book, that's really timely to be able to make sure the North say is featured in there. EVCI, I would also pull out as a theme. It has been one of those areas of work that I know your officers have welcomed in terms of the ability to work collectively as the North about how we achieve that estimated 12-fold increase needed for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we'll continue to evolve our tool in that area, and I think specifically thinking about the grid capacity that needs to be enabled for the demand that will come from electricity. I will pull out just a couple of other things, Chair, before I open it up for comment. I think it's fair to say freight and logistics has been a consistent theme, again, that this committee's talked about, but it is a pan-regional matter. So we will be doing work over the coming year around a rail investment pipeline, what's needed actually to unlock further freight investment on our rail, and similarly the work that we started about access to our major ports as well in the North. When it comes to rail more specifically, I think it's fair to say that you may have spotted the consultation that is now out around rail reform and devolution. So our focus over the coming weeks and into the new financial year will be what does the North as a collective want to do in terms of that role, bearing in mind the arrangements we have now, for example, through the Rail North Partnership. The Rail North Partnership itself is firmly focused on that next 10-year service specification for Trans-Pennine and Northern, and actually what do we need that to deliver in line with the strategic transport plan. And I think finally in the rail space it's worth mentioning we will continue with our state of play, which is about one plan for the North around the investment needed and the infrastructure delivery, so that we can look at those interdependencies and make sure that sequencing works in a way that enables maximum benefits. And I think it would be unfair not to mention bus, because it is a huge element of work for many of our authorities. So our intention is to continue the work on our bus forum, which is acting as a convening group to be able to share good practice, share knowledge and experience as many embark on the franchising journey or other arrangements, given further devolution and what's happening through the Better Buses Bill. So I will stop there and just would very much welcome comments and feedback to shape the onward advice to the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So please, any questions?
I think I'll have to belatedly declare an interest because I'm a director of Warrington's Own Buses, and there is a thing over the way the franchises are working in the combined authorities. Because the procurement and some evidence that they are excluding smaller operators because of the size of the contracts and everything. And having declared an interest, I'll also say there's an issue of what happens to a municipal authority under franchising as well, because that could be an interesting little sideline to some of the issues, especially if one of the authorities with a municipal bus company becomes part of a combined authority. Do they get squeezed out? Do they take over the whole area?
The latter is definitely a live issue that's been brought to our attention, so Peter and his team will be having a look at that for us. So I think to understand what some of the points are that we need to feed back.
And if I may, Chair, and the other issue which I'll flog again is there seems to be even more possibility that with devolution that rail services will be organised by the combined authorities, certainly in the northwest. I wouldn't go so far as to call it rivalry, but nevertheless, there's not always a sweet combination of interests between Merseyside and Manchester, and some areas might get squeezed out again entirely if the combined authorities are just looking after the best rail services for their area.
Thank you. I think one of the things that is important to bear in mind, I think it will come throughout all the different topics that we discussed today, but I think there's got to be a fairness, a shared interest, and the fact is that just as soon as you get to the boundary of Merseyside, you can't change the gauge on the railway line or the way the batteries are charged on the buses, etc. So we do have to, you know, I think one of the big powerful things, and I think this budget is about that, is about making sure there's somebody there who's perhaps holding to account, but also flagging up these issues, because there is a chance that we could make mistakes where, you know, and one of the things that you just brought up was the procurement rules are changing for local authorities, and yet we probably all want to be able to run a bus with the same sort of fitting, so that when the bus goes from one authority to another, then it can still run, etc. So anyway, thank you for that. Over to you, Eric. Thank you.
I thought there was a new spirit of cooperation between Manchester and Liverpool, because we had a discussion with the mayor, our mayor, Tracy, only the other day, and moves at a foot for us to just link up with your new mayor in North Yorkshire and the South Yorkshire mayor in that spirit of cooperation. We need to do something, particularly about cross-border, you know, particularly about bus. When we get bus on board, when we're all franchised with bus, there has to be some arrangements for cross-border working. And our part touches on Manchester, parts of Kirklees, and Calderdale going to Manchester. So there's got to be some cooperation there for cross-border working. So get me interested, particularly the ticketing side of things, because I think Manchester's sticking with a £2 fare for now on bus. Liverpool are the same, I believe. We're going to a £2.50 fare for now. And the national fare is going to be £3. So there's going to be some interesting conversations going forward with bus ticketing.
I think that actually will come up on one of the later papers today as well, so that's good. The focus really just at this section is on whether they've written a decent plan. I'm sure they have, and that they've costed everything. So really, if there's any, I'd really like to just scrutinise the plan as such, if there's any particular stuff on that. But I do think the point you've made is that part of the plan's got to accommodate enough resources to be able to perhaps arbiter and absolutely make sure that there is not just fair play, but there is sensible fair play, and that maybe the you know, so the colour of the bus might not matter, but the fact that they actually have the same fitting to the electric points would be helpful.
I like to play on words. Very good.
Take care. Thank you. Any more questions, please?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick comment, to be honest. I personally think that the plan that we have before us looks very good. I'm really pleased about the extent to which the themes within it reflect the conversations that have been had at the Scrutiny Committee over the past couple of years. I think one of the themes that comes out, which is positive, is there seems to be sort of engagement or optimism that in terms of the government there may be the opportunity for funding for rail and for some of our priorities. So I think it is very important that we have that focus on engagement and where there are opportunities that develop to see more funding in the north, we need to be making that case as strongly as we can. But broadly, I'm very happy to support this plan.
Thank you. Are there any more questions at this point or clarifications? One thing I'd like to just ask is there enough money in the budget to support what I would call the TFN offer, the marketing of the TFN offer? I know it comes up later, but obviously whatever they do is dependent on what's in your plan.
I think the answer is, Chair, that we will always like to do more if there was more resources available. But what we've done very carefully, working with our senior management team, is identify what the priorities are. We know, and you'll hear a little bit later from our head of strategy, that we are being inundated with requests. Some we haven't been able to fulfil because of resources, but we have made sure in our prioritisation within this plan that our resources are directed as far as possible to that TFN offer, recognising, of course, there are elements within this plan that are part of our statutory duties. So it's that balance between the statutory duties and then making available what we can through that route. And we will keep that under review through the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions on this particular item? I think therefore, Katie, hopefully you've got some good comments that help.
Thank you, Chair. No, that's much appreciated. I think some very strong messages in there about the cross-border and pan-regional role. And I think also, just picking up your point, Chair, that we will keep that, the resources around the TFN offer closely under review. And I'm sort of looking in Peter's direction to help us with that as well, because we recognise the value that actually if we can produce it once and you can use it many, and actually there is a technical capacity and capability here in TFN that again we want to make available as far as possible to the constituent authorities that we're here to support. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I shall now move us to the next item, which is the communications and engagement strategy. This again is about the communication goals and the aspirations of the support that TFN wants to give to all the local authorities, so that hopefully you will not have to waste, I use the word loosely, waste, let's call it duplicate, by perhaps employing consultants to help you when TFN will have gathered a targeted resource of evidence and tools that will help support your local authority, and maybe the local authority is the first place, TFN is the first place that the local authority should look for information. Anyway, over to you, Katie. I don't want to steal any of your thunder.
Thank you, Chair. Really, this is in advance again of speaking to the board next month, as we've just taken a refreshed approach to our comms and engagement to make sure our comms and engagement is supporting delivery of the business plan that we've just talked through. And actually that shift in role for TFN, not only from sort of the long-term strategy, but a much more supporting and enabling role to those authorities that we're here for, and that are our constituent members. So we originally took a comms strategy and sort of our headline objectives to the board back in the summer of 23. We said we would come back and review that in the event of a major change. Obviously that did happen in the summer of last year. The board decided to defer the item till March rather than the December meeting to make sure they'd got enough time to discuss it and give due consideration. But what we're proposing here is far more around TFN supporting, enabling and partnering with authorities to amplify your priorities, your work, but equally to take a more proactive approach in reaching out with our TFN offer. It was a point I know Mayor Coppard, I think, has made a couple of times, which is it's great that it's there, but you need to come out to us with it. Don't wait for us necessarily to come to you. So an engagement programme that enables our technical experts to go out, meet with the individual authorities and work through how we can support and enable delivery of your local transport plans. But I think importantly as well, it also recognises the role that TFN can play as a convener and an honest broker, I hope, in the ability to bring partners together and connect. And one of the areas of work that we've talked about there is very much that community engagement and having that voice perhaps from some of the more underrepresented groups in transport. We've got our Northern Transport Voices panel, which is nearly 2,000 members now that we use to build our evidence base that supports the strategic transport plan. But what more can we do to actually reach out and make sure that diversity of thought is really featured in the work of our organisation and through into the advice that we give our board? So it's very much, and I think it's probably a paragraph 4.3 I'd point you towards, that certainly for the year ahead that we're proposing around much more around advocacy, partnering and amplification, rather than perhaps necessarily some of the more direct standalone events that perhaps we've done in the past. That's not never to say never, but certainly in thinking as well in the resource-constrained environment that we are as the public sector, we believe it's right and appropriate to make best use of the resources we've got. And finally, I would say one thing that TFN has been really strong at is when the political leaders do wish to speak together as a collective voice, that we help and enable them to continue to do that as well. So at this stage, Chair, I'd just welcome any sort of further feedback, thoughts or comments just to shape the final advice that will go to the board on the 17th of March. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies for being late. I've had a nightmare journey on Northern and TransPennine. I should have been here at least 20 minutes early, but in actual fact, I think I was probably a quarter of an hour late. Yeah, I'm really interested in your community outreach programme, and I think it's great, and I think the idea of a community forum is great too. I'm just interested in what happens when there's a conflict between what underrepresented groups and community groups are saying and what business is saying, because we know that business likes just-in-time delivery, and that would be probably road freight, and certainly I know that some of the businesses in our area just say rail freight is too unreliable, etc. Can't envisage it at the moment. So how do we, and we know that community groups want to get freight off the road because it's causing congestion, etc. So how are we going to manage that conflict, assuming that conflict arises?
With TFN's work across the board, it's got to be based on evidence. And I think the important point about having the community element as well as the business voice in there is actually it's part of the evidence base. So that actually if the TFN board is wanting to consider what might be the prioritised investments for freight, whether that's freight on the rail or freight on the road and how that might look, that they've got that evidence to be able to consider in their decision making, or indeed any statutory advice that we might give to the government as well in our role there. It's quite difficult to sort of say specifically what you do in a conflict situation because there's not a real example, but I think the important point here is that everything that we've provided by way of statutory advice, including the strategic transport plan, is based on evidence. It's based on what the data's telling us, it's based on what the feedback's telling us. We have had some tremendous feedback from our Northern Transport Voices panel that sometimes has been at odds, but it's part of a broader suite of evidence that enables you to give a balanced view, balanced recommendations about what decisions might be taken on investment, and that would be the approach, Councillor Perry, that we'd seek to carry on taking, but strengthening that community and diversity of thought voice into our work, because it's something, again, the board have come back to time and time again. How do we get that diversity of thought? Because you are a group of elected members, but making sure that we're getting the perspectives from the communities across the north of England. I hope that helps give some reassurance, even if I can't comment sort of specifically how you'd manage a conflict.
Well, I suppose what you're saying is that we have to make sure that our community groups have evidence to back up what they're asking for.
And I think it's their voice as well that becomes part of our evidence then in terms of the advice onto the board, and that's certainly what we've done with Northern Transport Voices thus far.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's just basically what does it look
think the short answer, Councillor O'Connor, is co-design. What the board have asked us to do is make sure that diversity of voice, that diverse voice is part of our work. One mechanism has been our citizens panel that I've mentioned. In the past, in previous roles I've had prior to TFN, we have had community forums, we've had non-government associations where we've brought together representative bodies that can actually offer views and thought as we're developing policy or statutory advice. What TFN shouldn't be doing is replicating anything that's happened at the local level, because the local leaders, the mayors, the local politicians, you will know what your communities are saying, doing, feeling. So I think it's about how can we bring all that evidence and insight together at a pan-regional level. So when Transport for the North Board is considering pan-regional investment priorities, it's got that. So a little bit of work through about how it works in practice, but I think, if I can assure you, it's not about duplicating, it's about making sure we've got that insight and evidence at a pan-regional level, because you're the experts in your local communities. You know, that's why devolution's here. That's why devolution's here, and it's about how we can corral that to support our evidence base and make sure that voice of the public is really strong.
I think one of the things on consultation is, because I'm always staggered by the lack of numbers on consultation. So the more focus on consultation, the better. So, for example, my council might think 100 responses is good, but there's 600,000 people. And when we had Harrogate Borough Council as part of North Yorkshire as the senior tier, I was involved in let's call it a public consultation about a relief road, which I felt was erroneous, let's put it that way. However, one of the things that did happen was there was a consultation, and we actually got 15,000 people to react. Now that's, you know, out of a population of what, 90, 100,000. That's what I'd call a serious consultation, but most of the time consultations are small, and I think, and I'm disappointed. And then people turn around and go, well, I didn't know they were going to build on that field, but they missed the consultation or whatever it is. And I do think that by co-creating and combining evidence from various areas, we can start to build a better picture. So I do think consultation is a critical area. And just one other thing that I picked up the other day, apparently consultants do consultation, and of course they don't. And I think people don't realise that consultants are really special advisors that we might employ from time to time, but they're nothing to do with consultation, which is a completely separate thing that we as representative authorities should be driving. So, but I think it's well worth it, the comments on that. So please, Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. So one is to sort of build on, and I think your points that you're raising there about the buy-in from members of the public. There is a question, to what extent do constituent authorities sort of buy in on working with TFN to support consultations? It strikes me that making use of social media channels is the best way to get to members of the public who, you know, aren't going to be thinking about TFN during their day-to-day lives, but if you're on Facebook and something pops up, you might think, okay, I'll engage with that. And if we can work with the various you know, constituent authorities across the north, they've got a huge amount of reach in terms of their social media channels. So I'm interested to know to what extent they you know, do collaborate and make you know, work with TFN to support that. The other question I had is that in terms of the APPG, and there's this sort of intention to not continue with that going forwards, I'm interested to know, is that purely about resourcing? What's the rationale behind that? It strikes me that that could be a little bit of a retrograde step. At the same time, I'm aware that perhaps over the last 6, 7 years, there has been a disappointment with a lack of support from Westminster for some of the things that we want to do at TFN, but I still think that we have to get our MPs on board so far as we can, and it might be regretted if we lose that, and it looks like we're not engaging with MPs anymore.
So perhaps I might take the first one. I think the general point, engaging with MPs is absolute paramount. But we want to do that in partnership with the MCAs and the LTAs, because we want to make sure that we're reflecting not just the pan-regional issues, but also amplifying what's important to them as well. So our proposal, as I said, it's a never say never. Our proposal this year is to support and partner with many of the other APPGs that already exists in terms of the broader agenda of Transport for the North Strategic Transport Plan. So, for example, there is an APPG for freight and logistics. Actually, how can we add weight and support into that to make a difference around freight and logistics, which has been identified as a priority? I think I recognise there are a lot of APPGs, and we've been fortunate. Sometimes we've had very good attendance, sometimes we've had very minimal attendance. So actually that balance of resources, and actually where we can secure more capital involvement and advocacy, we want to just try the partnering approach with other APPGs and keep in mind, actually, does that work? Is that proving more effective? Or do we want to revert to having something dedicated for transport across the north, as it was called? So we're going to keep that under review, Councillor, but I know many of the individual MCAs have their own related APPGs, so I think we want to work with them as far as possible. And I think secondly, on the back of hopefully agreeing a business plan with you all, or with the board in March, we actually would like to do some outreach directly with the MPs across the region about how TfN can support them, particularly what we can do through the offer that might be relevant to them in their constituencies. So I hope that provides some assurance, but let me just check, does that answer on the APPG point for you, Councillor Salter?
Yes, I'm very happy with that.
Thank you. And I think in terms of working with MCAs and LTAs, it's fundamental. It's what we're here for. It's the re-pitch pivot within our business plan and our comms approach. So I think what we wanted to do through the paper was sort of set the context and the framework for that, and what we want to then work through is the details with the individual authorities. So as you'll see, one of the things in there is actually taking the board to different places around the region. We've traditionally sort of just gone between Manchester and Leeds in more recent times. Well, actually, let's get out across the region. We're in Newcastle in March. We're coming across to Liverpool in June. So how do we use those opportunities to amplify what's important in all of the areas across the north? And your points about social media, absolutely. You're probably, some of our channels are sort of plugging out our strategic transport plan messages, but we want to up our game in that area and again use those channels to amplify what's important for MCAs and LTAs and new combined authorities. But similarly, when we think about our business plan, how do we use those channels to amplify some of those pan-regional priorities, such as freight and logistics, such as the work around decarbonisation and EVCI? So this was the sort of starting gun, really, to then develop our more detailed plan across the year. Thank you.
Did you?
No, it's gone.
Okay. All right. Back to you, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as well as going to Newcastle in March, you're also coming to Cumbria in March, apparently.
That's the plan. I think we're still finalising details, but yes, we're hoping to.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask about, the details. So you will be letting us know when you're actually coming and where you're coming to?
Yeah, no, I believe we're already in consultation with our sort of lead members in the area that sit around the board. I'd need to go back and check Councillor Perry on the details, because it's been organised via our chair's office. So let me come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well, while you're just thinking, I've got one, and it might be an overlap with, so Peter, don't shout at me, with item 7. One of the things that I think might be quite helpful is, because I don't think you advertise your services strong enough. So one of the things might be a quarterly newsletter to the councils, saying, you know, these are the services, and maybe even who's taking them up. So so people can make references, because we have that in one of the papers. We can see who's taken up the gold, silver, bronze, and who's not done anything at all. The other thing that I thought might be quite helpful would be if we have, so for example, Peter, you're the specialist on decarbonisation. So if you were to hold a meeting once a year, but where you invited group, rather than this one-to-one, which is inefficient if you're trying to market the business. And if you sort of had a group where the appropriate decarbonisation officer was invited from every authority, then suddenly you've got an event. So you could do, and you could do one for roads, and you know, and if we look at a one how to use the green book as it stands, because we've also got that on here, and then one might be, these are the things we're asking for. And I think that way you might get some engagement from the actual officers, but actually if you plug in using, because social media is great if you know, I mean, the big challenge for all of us here today was getting here. You know, so we had Gary here at 2:30 in the morning, and Jill, who was late, but you know, and you know, so tight. Well, he wasn't quite that early, but he was exceedingly zealous. I did have to wake him up. He was lying on the bench. No, he wasn't. But he was here from no. He was here exceedingly early. So yeah, so I think there's some. But joking aside, I think there might be some good messaging that you can get over that way, and people might just go, "I didn't realise you could get that from there." Because as I say, we have very tight budgets, and if we can actually get the information without having to get somebody to reinvent it, plus the fact it comes from an integrated approach, so they would also know what maybe Blackburn are doing as well as Bolton, as well as Manchester, rather than you've just done a particular piece of analysis on, I don't know, a roundabout on the A19. But anyway, but that was my thought process. I'd like to throw that one in for you. But it might be part of Peter's, so I apologise if I've crossed into a different part of the meeting.
Well, no, not at all, actually, because I think that was the point about, as I said, being more proactive in advertising what we've got available. So that absolutely, Chair, your first point speaks to that. We do want to resurrect our regular newsletter. And I think, secondly, your point about bringing officers together, we already have established a number of different officer groups. So we have our executive board, which obviously acts as a feeder board and advice into the member committees. But we have our EVCI forum, we have a forum around rural, we have our strategic oversight group, which provides a vehicle to pull together around topics such as decarbonisation. So I think probably the thing on my mind, on the back of your comment, Chair, is actually how we make better use of some of those groups, and perhaps present them as a more of an opportunity to engage in an event, to give it a little bit of profile as well. So perhaps we'll take that away and consider how we use those a little bit more effectively. Thank you.
Over to you.
I don't know whether this is the time to mention it, but you've touched on decarbonisation. I think it'd be interesting to know what's going in the heads of local authorities, all of us, what we're doing about hydrogen and the fuels of the future. Because with fossil fuels, all being well, will be a thing of the past in the not too distant future. And then with everybody's investing in EV and charging points all over the country. But what if they could become obsolete? What if hydrogen really is a fuel of the future? And then we're going to have charging points everywhere, and all these EV chargers are obsolete. Are we thinking about that? Are local authorities thinking about that? Are combined authorities thinking about that going forward? Because we're investing massively in electric charging points. Maybe it's obsolete technology in the not too distant future.
I'm going to suggest that we ask Peter, who's our head of strategy, just to give you a bit of a view of what we're doing as TFN and some of the evidence for that.
Yes, so we have from the last 2 years, we've carried out a piece of work which we've done alongside the gas networks, and that's to try and mesh plans for hydrogen pipelines, which is something that the gas networks and National Gas Grid, I think they are, is also looking at. And we're meshing that with heavy-duty travel demand, transport demand, to essentially look at where that demand might be, and the proximity of it to pipelines, which ultimately is where you would need to get to if you wanted to get the level of supply and the cost down. You do a pipeline supply. We have that visualizer available as part of our TFN offer. It's publicly available. And we are currently scoping alongside the gas networks on how we might upgrade that to bring in more modes, aviation, sustainable aviation fuel, so power to liquid, which is direct use of hydrogen, and also how we might look at potential mobility demand alongside industrial demand, and where the two can complement each other. So in other words, where are those places where it's a more natural fit? So we are doing some work around that, and there are several authorities that are actively looking at taking hydrogen forward. So I'll point to Bradford, who have just approved, or approved a few months ago, a green hydrogen and EV refueling station. So it'll produce the green hydrogen, and you'd be able to. Yes, and they want the their bus fleet to utilise that. And there are certain, ultimately, I think there are certain places where it could have more of a niche, particularly in rural areas and rural bus routes. And that's really where we're looking to focus now, is where are those niche areas for hydrogen. So that's what we're doing, and we know that there are a number of authorities who are looking particularly for bus fleets at the moment.
Internationally, if we can come back to it.
Of course.
Internationally, every time I open my computer, because I've links with lots of these, you put hydrogen in it, everything piles in. Innovations everywhere, new engines being designed and created, not just for bus, for heavy goods, but for cars. 2 litre engines are being created, so we could be well running our cars in the future on clean fuel. They've even invented a tube for refuelling. You just slot the tube in, take it out, put another tube in, and you're away again. There's lots of things happening throughout the world regarding hydrogen and transport. As I said, it's new technology, a lot of it, but I don't want us, I don't want our local authorities, I don't want a country investing billions in what could be outdated, obsolete technology as we going forward.
So just taking your point, I think the first thing is...
Can I just say before, to interrupt you, you've told me a lot of things that I didn't know about, perhaps we're not shouting about enough, about what we're actually doing and what, that's already there. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, okay. So look, thank you very much for that. I think the one thing that, if I take it from a strategic point, what you've said first and foremost is, yes, TFN is, I believe, is scanning the horizon just as much as anyone else. There will be mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, then you're not trying hard enough. One of my favourite quotes is from Emerson Fittipaldi, who was a racing driver, for those that don't know or are too young to remember him.
I remember Fittipaldi.
And he used to say that if you feel like you're in control, you're not going fast enough. So we do need to be, but we do need to be cognizant of the changes. And I actually thought you maybe had shares in one of these companies for a minute. You were advocating it that hard, but that's great. Anyway, I've got Matthew next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To be honest, I just wanted to come in very briefly to support what Councillor Firth was saying. I do feel that there has been a theme at a lot of the Scrutiny Committee discussions that we are interested in making sure that hydrogen does have sufficient attention. I'm very enthusiastic about electric vehicles, where that can be rolled out, but I do think we need to have, a two-stream approach, because we just don't know where we will be in 5-10 years' time. It could well be that hydrogen becomes the dominant model for car travel, and it does feel to me that every time the committee raises this point, the response we get is, well, there's good work being done in terms of HGVs, and silence in terms of what's been done in terms of personal, private car use. So it does feel to me that I would like to know, is there a sort of blockage on being able to do any work on that? Is there a feeling that we just cannot move forward with supporting that until, say, there is an intention from central government to really support hydrogen for car use? Is that the issue that we're facing? And in a sense, I do think it would be useful at some point for the Scrutiny Committee to have a really much more detailed look at the hydrogen strategy and what potential there is to broaden that scope in the years to come, or whether really we are very confident that only HGVs will be viable in the short to medium term for hydrogen.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on that, I think the first thing is that maybe Gary would take a note and say that perhaps we request a paper on this current state of play with hydrogen. I think that would be a fair thing to do. I think I'm getting lots of nods. The second thing is, I think BMW, I don't know if you run a BMW, Councillor Salter, but they are spending a lot of money on hydrogen right now, as well as several other places. And in North Yorkshire, we even have, even in somewhere like rural North Yorkshire, we have a hydrogen power station, petrol station, or whatever you want to call it, fuel station. And if you were, we haven't got anybody from Tees Valley here today, but they would say that they're just building at the moment a green hydrogen plant in that area as well. So there are moves afoot, certainly, I can reassure you of that, but perhaps we should, for the sake of even in knowledge share and transfer, that we get something on this so that we can, so people aren't caught out. And so I think that's a good point. I've got Councillor McMaster next, and then Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to the subject of hydrogen, other than I am optimistic that hydrogen is, I share your optimism that hydrogen is something that we need to look at. And I often wonder why we're not running them more parallel to establish the better of the two, the electric versus the hydrogen. I also get the feeling that I know we can't change it here, but I get the feeling we're investing heavily in electric, and hydrogen could be potentially better. And my thoughts are, before we invest millions, billions, rolling out EV everywhere, if we ran them parallel, we could establish a pattern of dominance between the two. So I just wanted to share that optimism.
Thank you. And Councillor Perry.
So I don't like to rain on everybody's parade, but I'm not so optimistic that we can actually produce as much green hydrogen, with the emphasis on green, because I think green hydrogen is like a phrase now, and it doesn't actually mean anything, because there are lots of colours of hydrogen that aren't green, that kind of wish they were. I don't think that we have the support, really, for the production of the amount of green electricity that we need to create the green hydrogen. And I just think, well, I don't like to put to second guess what officers are going to say, what the report is going to say, but I think hydrogen is going to be pretty much a niche market in HGVs and buses for the future in fuel terms.
So we're recording this, and we'll play this back to you in 10 years' time, and we'll see who was right at the time. We are straying slightly from the topic of communications and engagement strategy. I know what we get excited about. Yeah, I know that's what it's about, yeah. So hydrogen is very exciting and emotive, and I'm sure we'll come up with a combination, and there's lots of stuff going on. And now that my electric my electric vehicle is no more. I'm looking forward to being able to invest in a hydrogen one soon, and hopefully the rodents that chewed my car to pieces will not do the same with the hydrogen vehicle. It might be an interesting consequence. Anyway, are there any more comments on the communications and engagement strategy?
Can I make a very brief plea for plain English when we're using our communication strategy? It wasn't actually Transport for the North, it was actually National Highways, but they sent me a letter in response to my request, which was so obscure that I had to send it to my highways mentor and say, what does this mean? To which he replied, I think they're saying very politely no to your request. But please, if we're going to involve the public and community groups, etc., plain English is very necessary.
Councillor, you are a woman after my own heart. I'm in the same space.
I just cut and paste straight into AI. However,
yeah, sorry, it's just probably to follow on. It's thinking about the people who are not disabled, or people who are disabled, things like that. Will there be a strategy in place for that, or what is the current situation when we're consulting? There's a lot of people who are physically excluded, and they don't seem to get. I want to be everybody to get a newspaper delivered to the door, once a week. That's stopped. So there's a lot on social media. There's not a lot on actually coming out to the door.
So it's a key priority for me that our communications are accessible. So when we did, for example, our consultation on the strategic transport plan, we made it clear that actually if large print was needed, etc., we could make that available. What we want to do is tighten up some of that, in terms of, I think many government departments, for example, have been working through how do we make things more accessible online if you're using screen readers. Just thinking about colours. So actually, we are checking when we do our publications, actually, have we thought about colour blindness here? So there are a range of checks and balances that we do already, but I think it's fair to say that as we develop our new communications plan, I want to put a tighter spotlight on that so that our work is accessible to as many people as possible. And that indeed has been a theme you may have spotted with our Rail North Committee. We're thinking about accessibility at railway stations, so thank you for calling it out, and we will keep working on it. Thank you.
Councillor Parish.
Chair, really much for entertainment value as anything, but in the brief media training I did, the trainee gave us an awful example of not plain English. He'd been interviewing somebody from London Transport who said in an interview, we must take cognizance of the pedestrian element in the modal split. And the interviewer said, do you mean some people walk to work?
Precisely, and I think that's the bit we've got to be guarded and careful of. But
it's talking as we would talk to each other normally, rather than policy speak, is the way I'd describe it. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, the other thing, of course, is, unfortunately, he's now on the main board, but we do have a representative, or we have had a representative past who says, don't forget to make sure all the acronyms are explained. You know what I mean, don't you guys? So that's important as well. Are there any more comments on the communications and engagement strategy, or can I now move to Peter, who's going to talk about the Northern Appraisal book? Over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm mindful of what you've just said about plain English and trying to talk about the appraisal framework, but I'll do my best. So in our strategic transport plan, we highlighted the need for transport investment appraisal, the process to better serve us in the North. And the Northern Appraisal Playbook is essentially our workflow that's helping us implement that recommendation within the STP. And we're looking at those areas specifically of the existing appraisal process, which are potentially perpetuating that underinvestment in transport schemes in the North. And we're looking at the potential changes that are needed to the appraisal process to make sure it better reflects those wider social, environmental and economic benefits that we know that schemes in the North can accrue. And to do that, we're looking at how we can make the most of the existing flexibilities within the Green Book that are there following its review by Treasury in 2020. And in the first phase of work, we found that there are a number of areas where we can make use of those flexibilities, and we actually already have the data sets and the tools to be able to do that, and many of those flow through from our TFN offer, actually. We also found out that there's a number of areas where we might expect to see more significant shifts in the level of benefits, but that would require a much more fundamental shift in the national appraisal approach. In terms of the outputs, we've created a practical hints and tips document that we hope that officers can use when they're building business cases. And you can see a high-level summary of that in Appendix 1 to the board report. And we've already applied the principles from our findings to support a levelling up fund bid for one of our local transport authorities. Going forward, we want to identify some live business cases where we could apply our findings, and we've already got our eyes on Bradford Station and the A19 north of Newcastle, but they're yet to be confirmed. We've also, through the phase 1 work, identified some further areas which, with some further research, we can better understand the potential of them to make a difference in northern business cases and how we might look at them in the existing flexibilities as well. And a list of those further areas is included in Appendix 3 of your board report. And actually, we're already starting to work on one of those areas, and that is the value of travel time. So how is travel time valued differently in different places in the UK and for different journey purposes as well? And that's a piece of work that we're taking forward with the Independent Transport Commission. We're bringing together academic and industry experts to scope what that potential research would look like. And finally, we want to use the evidence that we've generated during this first phase of work to have a meaningful discussion with Treasury on some of those more fundamental changes I hinted at earlier. And Katie alluded to the recent announcement by the Chancellor of a further review of the Green Book, and that gives us a good chance to have that conversation. So in Appendix 2 of the board report is a draft of the letter that we intend to send to Treasury, outlining some of those key initial areas for consideration, and they include that we need the need for a devolved appraisal process to accompany devolved funding. And in the letter, we also make an offer to coordinate a collective submission for our partners as well. So, Chair, we're asking the committee to note our findings and the progress we've made so far, and for feedback on our proposed approach to Treasury and how we might support that latest Green Book review.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or thoughts? I've got one, but I see Steve's already got his hand up there, so crack on.
Just to follow up, it was in the minutes from Councillor Salter asking about this northern measure of time. And can you explain, is the hour going to be longer in the north, or in plain English, could you explain, you see values of time within the north, explore how values of time explore how values of time work to support schemes nationally. Yeah, if you can unpack that a bit, that would be helpful.
I'll let my more technical colleague, Rebecca, beside me to unpack it a little for you.
So, appraisal, a lot of appraisal values are based on the value of saving a minute or an hour of travel time. That is not the same for every person. It depends on what purpose you're travelling for, how far you're travelling, what mode you're travelling, amongst other things. So if we just want to do a review of whether that's actually working as it should, or if it's working in a way that's holding back north. That's the quick explanation.
So that's it.
So For example, the value of travel time savings in London and the South East tends to be higher than in the North, because a lot of the journeys that the time savings are being made on are classed as business use, whilst a lot of the journeys in the North from a scheme may be classed as a different use. For instance, I'm not sure if we know the value for informal carer journeys. They are very valuable, but are they being valued in the right way?
I get it, but anybody else got any questions? But it's an important measure.
I mean, there's just so many variables. I mean, you know, much prefer to use public transport for most things, but you know, for convenience and journey time, especially for shorter journeys, the car's probably better. But you can't safely work while you're driving, I don't think. And so it's that sort of thing where, you know, what are you actually measuring? You know, the fact we can all take phones with us and do all sorts of things while we're travelling on public transport, rather than just looking out the window. Maybe people need to look out the windows more. But it's a bizarre concept, and I need a lot more unpacking, I think, before to get my head around it.
Well, I think it's going to complement with something that I'm about to mention, but I think the value of time. I mean, let's just talk about HS2 for 2 seconds. HS2 was being marketed as this thing about speed. Most people who would travel from Leeds to London or Harrogate to London, they don't care for 20 minutes. It's my office. If I'm going to London, I just do work, and if I get a bonus 20 minutes, that's great. If I don't, it doesn't matter either. And so I think this value of time, though, is important, but it's how you do this convenience thing. The point I wanted to make of, and I've got it as down as Appendix 1, where you starts up with things like updated methodologies to assume new jobs and homes. But the one I would put on the bottom of there is, and I look to my colleagues to perhaps agree with me or disagree, but there's something, if you look at, I talk about something called people, planet and profit. So in other words, the 3 things, or it could be called the triple bottom line. But there's something called social return on investment, and this isn't mentioned here. And I think social return, I think the value of time is part of that, because if you are, for example, valuing how quickly a carer can get from one client to another, then that's certainly got a social return on investment. But one of the things in the north of England, certainly compared to the south, and you could write a paper on this, but I won't get you to do this, I won't ask for this, but the cost of travel in the north of England is highly inflated compared to central London. It's probably 3 to 4 times as high, and that's because of the switching of operator. So one of the things, when you switch from one operator to another, you don't carry on with the same ticket, you have to buy a new ticket. So I think there's got to be something around social return on investment, but and that social piece is where it comes back and says, well, actually, this is important. You know, the stakeholder, which is the passenger. It's not just, and I think there's something got to be important. There's something important in that piece of the calculation. How does the Green Book result in an improvement for our residents? How does that calculate? You know, how is that improvement taken into account? Thank you.
I think that is the essence of why we've started on this project, because we know that those wider social and environmental as well as economic gains are so important for us in the north. And what is good for the environment and society tends to be good for the economy as well. So absolutely, and I think that the travel time example is a good one around the social return on investment, because we do have journeys that are not classed as business journeys but are returning a huge amount of investment back into society, whether that's saved public healthcare costs or other. And I think that's exactly what we want to unpack through that research.
So anyway, but I'd like you to perhaps consider adding social return on investment on your list. I'm surprised the government haven't got it on their list. Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to really build on the themes that we've been discussing. I do think that a key issue for the North for a long time has been the sense in which transport investment is simply targeted, or it certainly feels that it's targeted just on the basis of the financial return on investment, and that relatively simplistic model has seen funding concentrated in London and to a certain extent in major urban areas, and has left the North out and sort of created a real sense of injustice. And I think that's part of what Transport for the North was originally set up to challenge. There are, for instance, we've discussed it many times in the scrutiny committees, the sense in which rural areas often feel that there are issues with reliability of public transport, where there even are public transport options available. And in that case, if you've got, say, older residents who are in rural areas, they need public transport in order to get to the hospital, but also in order to get out and about and have social opportunities. If you can challenge that essentially transport-related social exclusion, there's an enormous amount of value, and there is actually, financial value that could be captured there, but they're not people who are going to work or going to make business deals or whatever. So I do think it's something that, in a way, we have been discussing for a long time, is how to capture within our modelling a lot of the values of these investments that go beyond a simple, straightforward economic calculus. So I really support, I did feel that was a thing that came through in this work, but I just wanted to draw that out and make clear that I do see the value of that, although the northern value of time, initially it may seem very counterintuitive and bizarre. I do think it is worth bringing out and sort of, with the proper explanation, I think it should be seen as a valuable way of making the case that we do need this sort of investment. There's great opportunities from it.
Thank you. Councillor Perry?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Don't disagree with anything that you've said there, but also we need to be capturing the benefit to communities, rural communities in particular, of having families there with young people, children and young adults, keeping schools open, keeping social life going, keeping village halls, making it profitable, organising social events for young people, keeping the village shop open, maybe even keeping the village pub open. All those things need captured in our social benefits of public transport. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going back to the last section of it, where we areas for potential further research and engagement with government. And it follows on, it's almost like a theme, it follows on from what you've been saying. Examine schemes that were never delivered, poor marginal value. How we can make the case for these to happen. And I think this is really worth exploring with government, particularly in mind with what you've been saying. It's almost going back to the beaching days. We get the lines back where the beaching scrapped, and then we'll have that connectivity again, and it's much needed, as we're all aware.
Any other comments for Peter on his Green Book appraisal at all?
Just one another. I'm just thinking about along the lines of the bus passes and the train passes for the old age pensioners. We've done a bit of work in St. Helens in the region, the Liverpool City region, where people who get that bus pass and the train pass over the age of 60, it costs us the region about 57 million. But when we've done the analysis, it actually creates £250 million worth of investments. With people, because people, they come out on the train or they come out on the bus and they'll go places,
Well, just picking up on that, I think I would just send that to Peter and say, is it any use? Is this piece of research that we've had commissioned any use to you, and can you use it to help? I think that's great. But I'm putting words into Peter's mouth.
So the work that we've done is available to you as it is. I think so. Please get in touch, and we can talk through the different aspects of the flexibilities that we have found already. I think the further work hopefully will be able to squeeze out changes which have even more value or potential value. I think, Chair, what I'm getting from colleagues is that we need to really make sure that we're looking at that wider view of social return on investment, particularly also taking into account rural areas. So we know that we can do that. One way we can do that is through the value of time of informal carers and so on, but there's a much wider spectrum there that we can consider. And also going back to those borderline business cases, and I know that's one of the things that we were proposing to do and test them if we can. I think there's sometimes an issue with the amount of information that's available for those business cases for us to be able to do that, but we'll certainly be trying to do that. Thank you.
I think there's lots of examples. So, for example, in Scandinavia, they used to grit the roads, and then they decided to grit the pavement. I don't want to sound sexist, but they then they got ladies on the council, and the ladies said, we want the pathways gritted so that we can get our kids to school, etc., because we use infrastructure differently. And what they found was that the amount of people at A&E dropped dramatically and saved more than the cost of actually gritting the pavements. And I do think we need to look at these things in the round. So that's just a live example of how things can be improved.
And Chair, if I might add, I think this is the genesis of this work, is that we traditionally look at time saving rather than actually, as Peter said, the economic, social and environmental benefits that come from better connectivity. We think about transport as a cost centre rather than what transport enables, and so this is about better making that strategic case and hopefully arguing for the reforms needed so that gets taken into account in decision making about investment rather than just the benefit cost ratio. So thank you.
And anybody any more comments on this particular item, or can I? That's great. One last thing, because it's something that I'm very excited about, is and now that Peter you've got strategy as part of your fund portfolio, I'd like to see the investigation of freight going by bus, so that effectively the bus fares don't matter. It's the freight that pays for the infrastructure, particularly in rural areas. I think it's got it's got a lot of mileage in it, for want of a better phrase. But I do think it's something that should be looked at. There's millions of white vans on the road going everywhere, maybe with 2 or 3 parcels in each. We should, So I don't know how you fit it in. I don't know if it even fitted into your budget. So I'm sorry about that, Katie, but I do think there is some merit in that, and maybe it's a public-private partnership.
We will take that one away.
We'll take that to our freight officer as a consideration.
I'm sure on local news about that, where you rock up to the bus stop, the parcel's on board, you jump on the bus, take your parcel off. It's almost like Amazon reverse, but it's loaded on the bus.
Yeah, but anyway, but things like medication stuff, most people get that delivered these days. Anyway, look, enough of that. I better move us on to the next item, otherwise I'll be getting shot, and we won't be going home on time, as I promised you. So next is the TFN offer, but it's all part and parcel. These items all sort of flow into each other. So if I just formally move us on to the TFN offer, which again is Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So we've covered quite a lot, as you've said, of this already. So I'll try and keep this relatively brief. We launched the TFN offer concept in September 2023, had that initial aim of aiding LTP development and providing capacity and capability for the development of business cases. And today we're updating because it's been running over the 18 months. We've done quite a lot of upgrading since that point. The offer is categorised as bronze, silver and gold, and that really is reflecting the level of complexity of the request and the amount of involvement required. And over the last 18 months, we've had a real focus on our bronze offer. And by that, I mean the provision of a wide range of tools and dashboards that partners can use in a self-service mode with fairly minimal input from TFN officers. And we've done that so that we can free up TFN staff time to service more of the silver requests, such as business case reviews. And Chair, I think that comes back to your point about how we're looking at we can deploy our resources in a smarter way. So the details on the offer, how to access it, what's in it, and the support available can be found in what we call our TFN offer brochure. We've just updated that. It's in Appendix 1 to this report, and it includes that full menu of our self-service products. And you know some of those already, our TRSC data tool, our electric vehicle charging infrastructure tool. We've recently added that to that with our carbon assessment playbook, our community severance tool, and a freight model mode share testing tool. And in terms of figures, since the launch, we've fulfilled 120 requests from partners. And we've conservatively calculated that equates to about £540,000 worth of savings for our partners. And that's based on an estimate of what our technical and analytical support would cost on the open market. And then further to that, the actual tools and the visualizers and the capabilities that we've developed and that are available through that bronze offer are estimated to have an equivalent open market development cost of around £5 million. But we want to do more, so we need to keep the offer up to date and make sure that it's what you need. There is now a monitoring and evaluation survey that goes out after we've fulfilled every request. We're also asking in our regular strategy one-to-ones for feedback as well. And Katie alluded to running these larger briefing sessions with individual authorities or combined authorities to run through the range of products available, and we can bring the appropriate topic specialists to that too. We've done it for Warrington Borough Council. We've got plans to do it with Sheffield City Council and Hull City Council, and we'd urge partners to get in touch if they'd like a similar session. And then finally, we're looking to put this online, develop an online space where the brochure will sit, a one-stop shop where all those bronze tools can be accessed and where you can make the silver and gold requests as well. So I'd ask the committee to note the update and the current value that we've accrued for our partners, and for any feedback on where you feel the future development of the offer should go. Thank you.
Any questions for Peter? Have we already exhausted him? Okay, well, in which case, I think we should move on to the next item, if that's okay with everyone, and that is the quarterly operating report. I apologise, it's 6 weeks ago now. You probably had it 6 weeks ago. I don't know if you've got any questions at all. Anybody got any questions on the operating report? Okay, that's fine by me. One thing I just want to slip in here, it's not on the agenda, but it just occurred to me that while we perhaps ask Katie and the team to think about things, one of the things that I think might be worthy, and I think we'd be interested in seeing it, but we'll see what response I get in a second, is but how AI impacts on Transport for the North work and how it can be used to help. One of the reasons I say this is at the moment, most employers are behind the curve. AI is being used by employees and not necessarily by the employer. And what I mean by this is, let's imagine everybody in this room had the same job. We all would probably be using AI in a different way to help us do the job. So how do we look at how we unify that so that, so for example, Councillor McMaster might be way better at this because he's got a better access to AI, he asks it questions, whereas I don't. And I just think I think there's something about how AI is used. Now, whether it's TFN that look at this, in particular in relation to transport, or how we do this, but I do think that AI is going to impact a lot of what we do going forward. And it's whether, the paper might come back and say it's not us, but I do think, in terms of TFN, but I do think there's got to be some thought on that. Because otherwise you're getting this Wild West effect at the moment where some of your employees are using it and some aren't. And I don't know if anybody else has noticed what I'm commenting on.
Chair, I wonder if I might just come back because I'm pleased to say we are already on the case.
Oh, good. All right. I'm redundant already.
Well, I think the point is that machine learning has been evolving for many years, particularly when you look at the sort of transport planning world, and actually the concept of a transport model is effectively, in some cases, teaching a computer to repeat code that enables you to see what might happen if you did A, B, and C. So we're in the process of developing a policy for us as an organisation and our employees about how we do and don't use AI. We've taken some advice just from our government department as well, because clearly every government department is also dealing with this. I think we have to remember, AI that does exist is effectively putting information into a public domain. So we want to make sure that we are doing that in an appropriate way in line with law and legislative requirements. So I think that's the first point, and that's actually reflected in our risk register and the work that we're doing around that as well at the moment. So we're expecting to evolve that over the sort of coming 6 to 8 weeks. It's a current piece of work. I think the second element to it, though, is actually a more general question that we've been exploring around the role of technology in transport. I took over the rail portfolio in January. I never thought I'd spend so much time talking about electronic signalling and the benefits that it can bring. So I think there's a general piece, and we're currently recruiting into Peter's team some additional resource to help us look at more generally around connected mobility and technology and opportunities that might be realised. Of course, I think it's important to state that in terms of AI and technology, this absolutely does need a kind of clear framework and oversight from government. But in terms of thinking through opportunities for North of England, we will be doing that over the course of the year.
Thank you.
Yeah, the first time I heard about AI, I thought it was a Geordie term. AI, man. but strangely enough, I'm going on a course this weekend to try and get a grip on AI with colleagues in, would you believe it, in Glasgow, but it's the National Association of Councillors seminar. So, all being well, I'll come back educated, but we'll see. But I'm a bit of a Philistine at the moment regarding AI, but I'm sure all colleagues are well aware of steeped in AI and know all about it, don't you?
I think we'd welcome your feedback, Councillor, from your session in Glasgow.
Yeah.
Drop me an email or we'll have a call.
Yeah, Chair, talking about what AI means in different languages, historically I was a farmer in Africa, and AI meant an artificial insemination. we never had bulls on our dairy farm. I am dyslexic, and I've taken on more and more in council, and came to a stage where I was starting to struggle to keep up. I had too many reports to read and everything, so I downloaded the basic version of ChatGPT, I think it's called, onto my phone, and now I just simply scan documents, flick the page, scan documents, and then it reads it back to me. I put my earpiece in, drive public transport, whatever the case may be, and it reads it back to me.
I didn't know you could do that.
And I've actually started writing reports and everything, so I can scan something. So I'll give you a true example. I'm on the Public Liaison Committee for our Green Recycle Centre, because it creates all sorts of smells and whatever. And I had a meeting to go to, and I thought, I haven't researched So I went to this chat GPT and I said, and I just scanned the document and I said, what is this? And it said, oh, it's a green recycle centre, etc., etc. And I said, judging from this document, are they keeping up with latest technology, best practices and everything? It said yes. However, they could be using, and it gave up with a couple of other terms. When I went to the meeting, I brought it up and I said, but have you ever tried this or that? And they were blown, how did I know it? So what I'm trying to angle at here is, I think, for example, public transport, somebody who's disabled, wheelchair bound or whatever, you could just simply say, you know, of the 2 buses available, bus services available, which one is wheelchair friendly? And ChatGPT, or whichever one you choose, will be able to help you in terms of public transport and things like that. So I think, yes, the answer is I think it does play a big part. And it does, and I was behind the times, and I think I'm ever so slightly ahead of my colleagues now.
A long way in front of me.
Well, that's great. Is there anything else anybody would like to make a comment on? Okay, well, in which case I'm going to revert to my machine learning and say the next meeting will take place Thursday the 5th of June later this year, and I think it'll be our AGM. Will that be right? So I look forward to seeing you all then. So thank you for attending today. Thank you very much.
I think, Chair, in which case it will be in person as well, as it'll be our AGM, so we'll let you know. Gary's working on location for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.